The blue glow of the computer screens cast long shadows across the bridge of the HSS Horizon as it moved through the dark space near Proxima Centauri. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars slowly drift by through the main window. The ship was on a routine mission to study new planets and map star systems that humans had never visited before. The Horizon was not a military ship. It was built for science and exploration, carrying equipment to study rocks, gases, and life forms they might find in deep space. The crew of 43 people had been traveling for 8 months, collecting data and samples from different worlds. Most days were quiet and peaceful. Exactly the way space exploration was supposed to be. Lisa Parker sat at her communication station, monitoring radio signals from nearby star systems. She was the ship's chief communications officer, responsible for maintaining contact with Earth and listening for any unusual transmissions. For the past week, she had been picking up strange signals from an unknown source, but they were too weak and broken to understand. Captain Lisa called out, adjusting the controls on her console. "I'm getting something new on the long range. Receivers. It's definitely artificial, but I can't make sense of it yet." Morrison turned his attention to her station. "What kind of signal?" "It's coming from the Chrysthera system, about 2 light-years from here. The pattern suggests it's a distress call, but the language is completely unknown. Wait. ... Lisa's fingers moved quickly across her keyboard as she tried to clean up the transmission. "I think I can boost the signal strength." The bridge fell, silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Chief Science Officer Nathan Brooks looked up from his research station, his curiosity awakened by the possibility of first contact with alien life. Security Chief Tony Martinez stopped his patrol and moved closer to listen. After several minutes of adjustments, Lisa managed to clear up the signal enough to hear actual words. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was musical and soft, like wind chimes, mixed with the sound of breaking glass. But underneath the strange beauty of the voice, there was something else: fear. "Please. ... Any who can hear this message. We need help. Our world is dying. The Devourers came from the dark between stars. They consume everything. Our shields are failing. We have no weapons. We have no way to fight them. If anyone receives this transmission, please help us. We are the Volani of Chrysthera. We do not want to die." The message repeated several times before fading back into static. The bridge crew stood in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. This was humanity's first contact with intelligent alien life, and it was a cry for help. "How far is the Chrysthera system?" Morrison asked, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the situation. Brooks quickly consulted his star charts. "About 2 light-years away, sir. With our current drive system, we could reach it in approximately 6 days. Can you tell anything else about the signal?" Morrison asked Lisa. She ran the transmission through her analysis programs. "The signal is definitely coming from the Chrysthera system. Based on the power levels needed to reach us, they must have used a massive transmitter. The language includes some universal common words, which suggests they've had contact with other spacefaring species before." Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's medical officer, joined the discussion. The voice patterns suggest they're in extreme distress. The speaker sounds exhausted and frightened. Whatever these Devourers are, they've been attacking for some time. Morrison stood up and walked to the main window, staring out at the stars. He had trained for many possible scenarios during his years in the space service, but responding to an alien distress call was not one of them. The Horizon was a research vessel with only basic defensive systems. They had no weapons designed for combat and no military training for warfare. "Sir," Chief Engineer Danny Walsh spoke up from his station, "we should consider what we're getting ourselves into. We don't know anything about these aliens or their attackers. We could be flying into a trap. We could be flying into a situation where we're completely outmatched," Brooks added. "These Devourers might be far more advanced than we are. Our ship wasn't designed for combat." Morrison continued looking out at the stars, weighing his options. According to Earth's first contact protocols, they should return to Earth immediately and report the situation to the proper authorities. A military fleet could be assembled to investigate the distress call properly. But that would take months, and from the sound of the transmission, the Volani might not have months. Lisa, can you send a response on the same frequency? Morrison asked. Yes, sir. The signal is strong enough for two-way communication if they're still monitoring. Morrison returned to his command chair. Open a channel. Lisa worked at her console for a moment before nodding. Channel open, sir. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel HSS Horizon. We received your distress call and are responding. We are changing course to your system and will arrive in 6 days. Please respond with your current status and any information about the threat you're facing. They waited for several minutes before a reply came through. The same musical voice, but now filled with surprise and hope. Human vessel, ... We did not expect anyone to answer. We are Elder Zephi High of the Volani Council. The Devourers have been attacking our world for 3 months. They consume our cities, our people, our very substance. We've tried to communicate with them, but they only hunger for consumption. Our defense shields will fail within days. We have no weapons, no military, no way to fight. We are a peaceful people. We have never known war. The transmission continued with more details about the attacks. The Devourers apparently arrived without warning and began systematically consuming everything on the planet's surface. The Volani had tried diplomacy, offering resources and technology in exchange for peace. But the attackers showed no interest in communication. How many of your people are still alive? Morrison asked. Perhaps half of our population remains. The others have been consumed. We are preparing to evacuate to our moon colonies, but the Devourers follow us everywhere. They seem to feed on both organic and inorganic matter. Nothing we have tried can stop them. Brooks pulled up everything he could find about the Kristara system on his computers. Captain, according to our long-range sensors, Kristara is a low-gravity world with a thin atmosphere. The planet appears to be rich in crystalline formations. If these Volani evolve there, they're probably very different from humans. Morrison made his decision. Elder Zephi High, this is Captain Morrison. We are 6 days away from your system. Hold on as long as you can. We're coming to help. You would risk your lives for strangers? We do not understand this concept, but we are grateful. Be warned, human vessel. The Devourers are unlike anything we have encountered. Are not like us. They do not negotiate. They only consume. Transmission ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Morrison looked around at his crew, seeing the mix of fear and determination in their faces. They were scientists and explorers, not soldiers. But they were also human beings who had just heard innocent people crying for help. All department heads to the conference room in 30 minutes, Morrison announced. We need to prepare for whatever we're about to face. As the crew dispersed to their stations, the Horizon changed course toward the Kristara system. None of them realized that they were about to introduce the galaxy to a concept that most civilizations had never encountered, the idea that some species simply refuse to accept defeat, no matter how impossible the odds might seem. The ship accelerated toward its destination, carrying 43 humans who had no idea they were about to become the galaxy's first Deathworlders. 6 days later, the HSS Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kristara system. What the crew saw through their sensors made them gasp in horror. The once beautiful planet was scarred with massive craters and burn marks that could be seen from space. Chunks of destroyed buildings and ships floated in orbit like a graveyard of metal and crystal. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the destruction on the main screen. The planet's surface glowed, with fires that had been burning for weeks. What had once been cities were now empty holes in the ground. The sight reminded him of old war documentaries from Earth. But this was far worse. My God, whispered Dr. Nathan Brooks, staring at his scanner readings. The destruction is enormous. Entire continents have been stripped bare. Around the planet, dark shapes moved like hungry shadows. The Devourer fleet consisted of dozens of massive ships that looked more like living creatures than machines. Their hulls were black and seemed to pulse with a slow, steady rhythm. Long, tentacle-like appendages extended from each ship, reaching down toward the planet's surface like the arms of some giant octopus. Those ships are huge, said Chief Engineer Danny Walsh, studying the tactical display. Each one is at least 3 times the size of the horizon, and they're doing something to the planet's surface. Lisa Parker worked frantically at her communication station. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy beams coming from the Devourer ships. They're literally eating the planet. The beams are breaking down matter at the molecular level and somehow transporting it back to the ships. Security Chief Tony Martinez moved closer to the tactical display. How many ships are there? I count 47 vessels in the immediate area, Brooks replied. Sensors are detecting more ships on the far side of the planet. There could be over 100 of them. Morrison felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. The horizon was one small research ship facing an entire fleet of massive alien vessels. But he had promised the Volani that help was coming, and he intended to keep that promise. Lisa tried to contact the Volani again, Morrison ordered. Within minutes, the familiar musical voice of Elder Sci-fi came through the speakers. Human vessel Horizon, we are surprised you actually came. We thought perhaps you had reconsidered. We keep our promises, Morrison replied. What's your current status? We have withdrawn to our underground shelters. The Devourers have consumed most of our surface cities. Our remaining defense shields are failing. We estimate we have perhaps 2 days before they can reach us in our deep refuges. Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Elder Sci-fi, we would like to establish visual communication. We want to see you, and you should see us. There was a long pause. Very well, human captain. We will activate our holographic transmitters. The main screen flickered, and suddenly the bridge crew was looking at their first alien being.
Elder.
Sci-fi stood about 4 feet tall and appeared to be made of living crystal. His body was translucent with a soft blue glow emanating from within. His limbs were thin and delicate like spun glass, and his head was elongated with large, gentle eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. The reaction was immediate and mutual. The Volani on the screen recoiled in shock, his crystal body flashing with what appeared to be fear. At the same time, the human crew stared in amazement at the beautiful but fragile-looking alien. You are very large, Elder Sci-fi said, his voice trembling slightly, and so dense. Your bone structure appears to be incredibly thick. Are you wearing some kind of protective armor? Morrison looked down at his simple uniform.
No, Elder.
This is just our normal clothing. We're not wearing any armor. Dr. Amy Foster stepped forward, her medical training taking over. Would you be willing to share some information about your biology? It would help us understand how to better assist you. The Elder's crystal form seemed to relax slightly. Of course, we are silicon-based life forms. Our bodies are composed of living crystal matrices that grow and repair themselves. We breathe a methane-based atmosphere in our internal fluids, our liquid crystal compounds that carry both nutrients and information throughout our bodies. Foster nodded, taking notes. What about your gravity and atmospheric pressure? Has gravity approximately 1/3 of what your sensors indicate for your species? Our atmospheric pressure is quite low, and we prefer cooler temperatures. We have hollow bone structures to allow us to move easily in our environment. The human crew began to understand just how different they were from the Volani. What seemed normal to humans would be terrifying to these delicate crystal beings. Elder Morrison said carefully, "Would you tell us about your history with warfare?" The question seemed to confuse the Volani leader. Warfare? I am not familiar with this concept. Could you explain? Brooks stepped forward. Fighting combat. When 2 groups have a disagreement and try to hurt each other to solve it, Elder Sci-fi's crystal body flashed with colors that seemed to indicate extreme distress. Hurt each other? Why would anyone choose to cause harm? We have never experienced such behavior. When we have disagreements, we discuss them until we reach understanding. The concept of deliberately causing harm is incomprehensible. To us, Martinez exchanged glances with Morrison. How do you handle dangerous situations? Wild animals, natural disasters, threats to your safety? We have no dangerous animals on Kristara. All life forms evolved in harmony. Natural disasters are extremely rare due to our planet's stable geology. As for threats to safety, we have never encountered any until the Devourers arrived. The crew, was beginning to understand that the Volani were completely unprepared for the violent reality they now faced. They had evolved in a paradise world where conflict simply didn't exist. Elder Morrison said gently, "Tell us about the Devourers. What do they look like? We've never seen them directly." They remain inside their ships. Their vessels arrived 3 months ago, without warning. They began consuming our cities immediately. We tried to communicate, to offer them anything they might need, but they do not respond to our transmissions. They simply consume everything in their path. Foster asked, "Have you tried to resist them in any way?" "Resist?" We attempted to strengthen our defensive shields, but they are designed only to protect against natural phenomena like solar radiation. They were never intended to stop deliberate attacks. We also tried to hide our population centers, but the Devourers seemed to detect any concentration of matter and energy. The human crew was starting to grasp the full scope of the situation. The Volani were not just peaceful, they were completely defenseless. They had no concept of warfare, no weapons, no defensive strategies, and no understanding of how to fight back against an aggressor. Elder Morrison said, "We need to understand something about your attackers. Do the Devourers communicate with each other? Do they show any signs of intelligence or planning? They coordinate their attacks perfectly. Each ship seems to know exactly what the others are doing. They move in patterns that suggest high intelligence, but they ignore all our attempts at communication. They seem to have only one purpose: to consume." Walsh had been studying the scanner data. "Captain, I'm detecting something interesting about those ships. They're not just consuming matter, they're growing. Each ship is measurably larger than when we first arrived." "Growing?" Morrison asked. "Yes, sir. It appears they're incorporating the consumed matter into their own structure. They're literally eating the planet and using it to make themselves bigger and stronger." The implications were terrifying. The Devourers were not just attacking the Volani, they were feeding on them and their world to become more powerful. Elder ShortStories spoke again, his voice filled with despair. "Human captain, you have seen our situation. We understand if you cannot help us. Your ship is small compared to the Devourer fleet. We do not expect you to sacrifice yourselves for strangers." Morrison looked around at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They had come here to help, and they weren't going to abandon these innocent beings to certain death. Elder ShortStories Morrison said firmly, "We're not leaving. We're going to find a way to save your people and your world." The Volani leader's crystal form flickered with what might have been hope. "You would truly risk your lives for us. We do not understand this concept, but we are grateful beyond words." As the conversation continued, the crew of the Horizon began to realize that they possessed something the Volani had never developed: the ability to fight back when faced with extinction. They were about to introduce the galaxy to the concept of refusing to surrender. Over the next several hours, the crew of the Horizon worked to establish better communication with the Volani survivors. As they learned more about each other, the differences between humans and the crystal beings became even more shocking. Dr. Amy Foster was discussing basic biology with Elder ShortStories, and she mentioned something that made the alien leader's crystal form flash with alarm. "Our home planet Earth has gravity that's about 3 times stronger than yours. We're used to much heavier conditions." 3 times? Elder ShortStories' voice carried disbelief. "How do you move? How do your delicate bone structures not break under such pressure?" Foster looked confused. "Our bones aren't delicate. They're actually quite dense and strong. We have to be able to support our body weight and move quickly when needed." To demonstrate, Chief Engineer Danny Walsh picked up a metal toolbox from his station and lifted it over his head with one hand. The toolbox weighed about 60 pounds, but Walsh handled it as easily as if it were made of paper. The Volani watching through the communication link made sounds of distress. "That container appears to be made of solid metal. How are you lifting? It's so easily. Are you using some kind of mechanical assistance?" "No," Walsh said, setting the toolbox down. "This is just normal human strength. We need to be strong enough to handle heavy objects and move quickly when we're in danger." Dr. Nathan Brooks decided to explain more about Earth's environment. Elder Sci-fi, our planet is what we call a heavy world. The gravity is strong, the atmosphere is dense, and the surface conditions are quite harsh. We developed physical strength and endurance to survive in these conditions. Harsh conditions? The elder asked. Well, our atmosphere is 21% oxygen, which is highly reactive and actually toxic to many life forms. Our weather includes violent storms, extreme temperature changes, and natural disasters like earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The Volani's crystal form began flashing rapidly with different colors. Your atmosphere is poisonous, and your planet tries to kill you with disasters. That's just the beginning, Brooks continued. Earth is also home to millions of species of plants and animals, many of which are predators that hunt and kill other creatures for food. Predators? Elder Sci-fi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Security Chief Tony Martinez stepped forward. Yes, creatures that eat other living things. Earth has massive predators like sharks that can grow to 30 feet long, bears that weigh over 1,000 pounds, and cats that can leap 40 feet to catch their prey. The Volani leader seemed to be struggling to process this information. These creatures, they deliberately kill and consume other living beings. That's how nature works on our world, Dr. Foster explained. Life forms compete for resources. Strong survive and reproduce, while the weak are eliminated. It's called natural selection. And humans survived in this environment? Elder, Sci-fi asked. Not just survived, Martinez said. We became the dominant species. We learned to hunt the predators, to build shelters against the disasters, and to work together to overcome any threat. The conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Commander Kelly Adams, the ship's tactical officer. Captain, I've been analyzing the Devourers ships. I think I understand why they're so effective against the Volani. Morrison turned to her. Have you found that the Devourers are essentially biological bulldozers? They're designed to consume unresisting matter and convert it into more of themselves. Their weapons are optimized for breaking down molecular structures, not for fighting against active resistance. What do you mean by active resistance? Morrison asked. Look at their attack patterns, Adams said, bringing up a tactical display. They approach slowly, in straight lines, without any defensive formations. They've never encountered prey that fights back, so they have no tactics for dealing with organized resistance. Walsh had been studying the technical specifications of the Devourers ships. Kelly's right. These ships are built for consumption, not combat. Their hulls are thick, but they're not armored against directed attacks. They're designed to absorb matter, not deflect weapons. Dr. Brooks made another disturbing discovery. Captain, I've been studying the Volani's description of other spacefaring civilizations they've encountered. It appears that most intelligent species in this galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds similar to Crysthera. Meaning what? Morrison asked. Meaning that warfare, violence, and predation are extremely rare in this galaxy. Most species develop technology to transcend their limitations rather than developing themselves to overcome challenges through conflict. The implications were staggering. The crew was beginning to realize that humans might be unique in the galaxy as species, that had evolved through constant struggle and had developed the ability to fight. Back against impossible odds, Elder Sci-fi spoke again, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. We are beginning to understand why you offered to help us. Your species is accustomed to facing extinction and refusing to accept it. That's exactly right, Morrison said. We've been fighting for survival for millions of years. Every disaster, every predator, every challenge that should have destroyed us just made us stronger and more adaptable. The Volani leader was quiet for a long moment. We called for help because we believed death was inevitable. We hoped someone might help us. Evacuate our people to safety. We never imagined that anyone would try to save our world. Martinez demonstrated something that horrified the Volani even more. He showed them a basic human reaction test by having Dr. Foster drop a medical instrument behind his back. Without looking, Martinez spun around and caught the falling object before it hit the ground. How did you do that? Elder Sci-fi asked. I heard it falling and reacted instinctively, Martinez explained. Humans have very fast reflexes because we needed them to survive predator attacks and environmental dangers. Your reflexes are faster than our measuring equipment can track, the elder said, and you did it without conscious thought. Dr. Foster added another shocking fact. Humans can also survive for days without food or water if necessary. We can endure extreme pain, heal from serious injuries, and keep fighting even when we're badly hurt. The Volani's crystal form dimmed with what appeared to be exhaustion. You are describing abilities that seem impossible to us. We require constant nourishment, cannot tolerate pain, and our bodies are so fragile that minor damage can be fatal. Captain Morrison realized that the conversation had revealed something important. Elder Scifi, the Devourers have been successful because they've only encountered species like yours. Peaceful beings who accept defeat when faced with overwhelming odds. That is correct, the elder confirmed. Every species we know of understands that some challenges cannot be overcome. When faced with extinction, the appropriate response is to accept it with dignity. When Morrison said, "We're about to teach this galaxy a different approach, we're going to save your world," the Volani leader's form flashed with confusion. But how? Your single ship cannot defeat an entire fleet of Devourer vessels. Lieutenant Commander Adams smiled grimly. Elder, you're thinking like a peaceful species. We're going to think like predators. As the crew began planning their attack, they realized that the Volani weren't the only ones learning something new. The humans were discovering that their harsh evolutionary background had given them abilities that were completely unknown in this galaxy. Chief, Engineer Walsh began converting the ship's mining equipment into weapons. These plasma cutters were designed to slice through asteroids. They should work just fine on Devourer hulls. Dr. Brooks was analyzing the enemy ship's weaknesses. If we can disrupt their consumption process, they might not be able to maintain their structural integrity. Martinez was planning boarding actions using maintenance tools as weapons. We can use the emergency airlocks to get onto their ships. Once we're inside, we can cause damage they never expected. For the first time in their conversation, Elder Scifi's crystal form began to glow brighter. You truly believe you can defeat them? Morrison looked around at his crew. 43 humans who had evolved from millions of years of refusing. To surrender, Elder? We're not just going to defeat them. We're going to show this galaxy what happens when you threaten someone under human protection. The Volani leaders struggled to understand this concept. You would risk your lives for strangers? That's what humans do, Morrison said simply. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. As the horizon prepared for battle, the crew began to understand that they weren't just fighting to save the Volani. They were about to introduce the galaxy to the concept of Deathworlders, beings who had turned survival into an art form, and who refused to accept defeat under any circumstances. The battle for Kristata began at dawn on the planet's surface. Captain Jake Morrison had spent the night planning with his crew, turning their research vessel into something the galaxy had never seen before. A ship crewed by beings who simply refused to accept defeat. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh had worked through the night converting the ship's equipment into weapons. The mining lasers that were meant to cut through asteroids were now aimed at enemy ships. The construction tools designed to build research stations were modified to punch holes in alien hulls. Even the food processors had been turned into projectile launchers. Captain Lieutenant Commander Kelly Adams reported from her tactical station. I'm detecting movement in the Devourer fleet. 3 ships are breaking off from the main group and heading toward us. Morrison looked at the main screen where the massive biomechanical ships were approaching. Each one was over 2 miles long and covered in the same pulsing tentacles they had seen consuming the planet's surface. To any normal species, the sight would have been terrifying enough to cause immediate retreat. All hands battle stations, Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. Remember, we're not just fighting for the Volani, we're showing this galaxy what humans can do. The first Devourer ship fired its consumption beam at the horizon. The weapon was designed to break down matter at the molecular level, but Walsh had prepared for this. He activated the ship's modified deflector shields, which had been enhanced with crystalline technology provided by the Volani. Direct hit on our shields, Adams reported, but the shields are holding. The consumption beam can't penetrate our defense. Security Chief Tony Martinez grinned from his station. They're used to fighting enemies that can't fight back. They have no idea what to do when their weapons don't work. Morrison gave the order to attack. Danny, fire the mining lasers. The concentrated beams of energy that had once been used to cut through solid rock now sliced through the Devourer's ship's hull like it was made of soft butter. The alien vessel shuddered and began leaking a strange, dark fluid into space. Target hit, Adams announced. The ship is damaged but still functional. Dr. Amy Foster had been monitoring the enemy vessels from her medical station. Captain, I'm detecting something interesting. The fluid leaking from that ship contains organic compounds. I think there are living beings inside those vessels. Before Morrison could respond, the damaged Devourer ship did something unexpected. Instead of continuing its attack, it began to retreat. The other two ships moved to protect it, forming a defensive formation. They're learning, Morrison realized. They're adapting to our tactics. Chief Science Officer Nathan Brooks was analyzing the enemy response. Captain, this is exactly what we hoped for. The Devourers are designed to consume passive targets. When faced with active resistance, they don't know how to respond effectively. The second wave of attacks came from different directions. The Devourers had spread out, trying to surround the horizon. But Martinez had prepared for this as well. He launched a series of modified construction drones that had been equipped with small, explosive charges. The drones moved through space, like angry wasps, attaching themselves to the Devourer ships and exploding against their hulls. The alien vessels tried to use their tentacles to swat away the small attackers, but the drones were too fast and too numerous. Multiple hits across. All three ships, Adams reported, are taking serious damage. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Foster made a crucial discovery. While analyzing the organic compounds from the damaged ship, she found something that changed everything. Captain, she called out urgently, the beings inside these ships aren't the original Devourers. They're the remains of other species that have been consumed and converted into biological components. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? The Devourers aren't evil. They're following their biological programming to consume and grow. But the beings they've consumed are still partially alive inside the ships. They're being forced to participate in the attacks against their will. Communications Officer Lisa Parker had been monitoring all frequencies during the battle. Captain, I'm receiving weak transmissions from inside the Devourer ships. They're calling for help. Morrison made a decision that would change the course of the battle. Lisa, can you boost those signals? Within minutes, the bridge was filled, with voices speaking in dozens of different languages. All of them were crying out for rescue, begging to be freed from their biological prison. My God, Brooks whispered. How many species have these things consumed? Foster ran the transmissions through her analysis equipment. Based on the voice patterns and languages, I estimate at least 12 different species are trapped inside. Just these 3 ships. Morrison realized they were facing something even worse than a simple attack. The Devourers were a galactic plague that had been consuming peaceful civilizations for probably thousands of years. Lisa, can you establish communication with the trapped beings? I'm trying, sir. Signals are very weak, but I think I can boost them. After several attempts, Lisa managed to establish contact with one of the trapped beings. The voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with despair. Please, if anyone can hear this, we are the Corvani. We were consumed by the Devourers 800 years ago. We've been forced to participate in their attacks ever since. We cannot control our actions, but we can still think and feel. Please help us. The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. They weren't just fighting to save the Volani. They were fighting to free thousands of enslaved beings from a fate worse than death. Can you fight back against the Devourer control? Morrison asked. We have tried for centuries, but we are too weak. The biomechanical systems are too strong. We need outside help to break free. Martinez had an idea. Captain, what if we don't destroy the ships? What if we find a way to disrupt the control systems instead? Walsh began analyzing the Devourer ship designs. The control systems seemed to be concentrated in the central core of each ship. If we could get inside and damage the core, we might be able to free the trapped beings. Morrison made another impossible decision. Tony, prepare boarding. Parties were going inside those ships. The Volani, who had been monitoring the battle, were shocked by this plan. Elder Zephyhi's voice came through the communication system. Human captain, you cannot board those vessels. It would be suicide. Elder, we've discovered that the Devourers are holding thousands of beings prisoner inside their ships. We can't just destroy them. We have to find a way to free the captives. The boarding action began, with Martinez leading a team of 12 humans armed with modified maintenance tools. They used the ship's emergency airlocks to transfer to the damaged Devourer vessel, cutting through its hull with plasma torches. Inside, the alien ship, they found a nightmare landscape of biological corridors and mechanical systems fused together into a single organism. The walls pulsed with a slow heartbeat, and strange fluids flowed through transparent tubes throughout the vessel. This whole ship is alive, Martinez reported through his communication device. It's like being inside a giant creature. The team fought their way through the ship's defensive systems, which included biological tendrils that tried to grab them and mechanical systems that fired energy blasts. But the Devourers had never faced opponents who could adapt and fight. Back in real time, we've reached the central core, Martinez announced. I can see the control systems. They're integrated with what looks like brain tissue from different species. Using explosive charges, the boarding party destroyed the central control system. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The ship began to shudder, and the biological systems started to shut down. Most importantly, trapped beings began to regain control of their actions. The Corvani voice came through the communication system again, but now it was filled with hope instead of despair. We are free. The control systems are failing. We can fight back. The battle turned into a three-way conflict as the freed beings began to rebel against the Devourer biosystems from within. The ships that had been perfectly coordinated now began to fight. Against themselves, Morrison watched from the horizon as the impossible happened. The Devourer fleet, which had seemed unstoppable, began to tear itself apart as thousands of enslaved beings fought for their freedom. Captain Adams reported, the entire Devourer fleet is in chaos. The freed beings are taking control of their ships and attacking the remaining Devourer vessels. For the first time in galactic history, Devourer fleet was being defeated not by superior technology or numbers, but by the simple human concept of refusing to surrender and fighting back, no matter what the odds. The battle for Crysthera ended not with explosions or destruction, but with something the galaxy had never seen before, a Devourer fleet defeating itself. The massive biomechanical ships that had terrorized peaceful civilizations for thousands of years were now tearing themselves apart from within, as freed beings fought against their biological prison. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the horizon as the last of the Devourer ships either destroyed itself or fled into deep space. The once mighty fleet that had seemed unstoppable was now reduced to scattered debris in a few vessels, limping away into the darkness between stars. Final count, Kelly? Morrison asked Lieutenant Commander Adams. 43 Devourer ships destroyed, or disabled, sir. 7 ships escaped into hyperspace, but they're badly damaged and appear to be fighting internal battles as well. The freed beings are still taking control of their vessels. Dr. Amy Foster was coordinating medical aid for the rescued beings. Captain, we're receiving thousands of distress calls from the survivors. Many of them have been trapped inside those ships for centuries. They need immediate assistance. Communications Officer Lisa Parker had been working to establish contact with all the different species that had been freed. Sir, I'm getting responses in over 30 different languages. Some of these beings are from civilizations that were consumed over 1,000 years ago. The magnitude of what they had accomplished was staggering. The crew of the Horizon had not just saved the Volani, they had freed thousands of enslaved beings and struck a blow against a plague that had been consuming the galaxy for millennia. Elder Zephyhi appeared on the main screen, his crystal form, brighter than they had ever seen it. Human Captain Morrison, what you have done is beyond our understanding. You have achieved something that was believed to be impossible. Morrison felt exhausted but satisfied. We did what humans do, Elder. We refused to accept that the situation was hopeless. But you risked your lives for strangers, the Volani leader said, his voice filled with wonder. You could have been killed, and your entire species would have suffered the loss. Why would you take such a risk? Chief Science Officer Nathan Brooks answered the question. Because that's what makes us human. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. We fight against impossible odds because we believe that hope is worth defending. Security Chief Tony Martinez, who had led the boarding parties, was back on the bridge with his team. Elder, where we come from, we learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to help others survive too. When we work together, we become stronger than any threat. Dr. Foster added her perspective. The beings we freed today will go back to their home worlds and tell their people what happened here. They'll spread the word that there's a species in the galaxy that refuses to accept defeat. Over the next few hours, the crew worked to coordinate rescue efforts for the freed beings. Many of them had been trapped for so long that their home worlds had been completely consumed. But others still had civilizations waiting for them. Civilizations that had given up hope centuries ago. One of the most moving moments came when they established contact with the Corvani, the species that had first communicated with them during the battle. Their representative, a being named Keepervorth, appeared on the screen as a tall, graceful creature with silver skin and large, wise eyes. People of Earth, Keepervorth said, his voice carrying the weight of 800 years of suffering. We have been enslaved for so long that we had forgotten what freedom felt like. You have given us back our lives, our hope, and our future. How can we ever repay such a gift? Morrison shook his head. You don't need to repay us. Just go home and rebuild your civilization. Live free and help others do the same. The Corvani's eyes filled with tears. We will tell our children about the day the Deathworlders came to save us. We'll make sure that your species' name is remembered with honor throughout the galaxy. As word of the battle spread through the galactic communication networks, something unprecedented began to happen. Species that had been hiding in fear for centuries began to emerge from their shelters. Civilizations that had given up on exploration started to venture out into space again. More importantly, distress calls began coming in from across the galaxy. It's not just from worlds under attack by Devourers, but from civilizations facing other threats that they had always considered impossible to overcome. Captain, Lisa reported, we're receiving over 200 messages from different star systems. They're all asking for human assistance with various problems. Brooks was analyzing the incoming messages. Sir, these requests are for everything from natural disasters to hostile invasions to technological problems. It seems like the word has spread that humans can solve impossible problems. Morrison realized that the crew of the Horizon had accidentally announced humanity's presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. They were no longer just explorers from a distant world. They had become the species that other civilizations called when hope itself needed to be defended. Elder ShortStories spoke again, his crystal form pulsing with a soft, steady light. Captain Morrison, we have been in contact with the Galactic Council. They wish to establish formal diplomatic relations with your species immediately. The Galactic Council? Morrison asked. A loose alliance of peaceful species that share information and resources. They have been monitoring your actions here, and they are both amazed and terrified by what they have witnessed. Dr. Foster looked curious, terrified. Why would they be afraid of us? Because you have introduced a concept that most of the galaxy has never encountered, the idea that impossible situations can be overcome through determination and sacrifice. Many species do not know how to process this information. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh chuckled. They're afraid of us because we don't. Give up? Exactly, Elder ShortStories confirmed. Most civilizations develop technology to transcend their limitations. You have developed yourselves to overcome any limitation. This makes you unique in the galaxy. Morrison made a decision that would define humanity's role in the galactic community. Elder, please tell the Galactic Council that we are willing to help any species that needs our assistance, but we will not conquer or dominate. We will only protect and defend. The Volani leader's form flashed with colors that seemed to indicate deep emotion. You would extend your protection to the entire galaxy, if necessary, Morrison replied. We've learned that when good people face extinction, someone has to stand up and fight back. If we're the only species that knows how to do that, then it's our responsibility to help. Martinez nodded in agreement. Besides, we've discovered that we're not alone in the universe. That means we have neighbors now, and humans protect their neighbors. Over the following days, the crew of the Horizon worked with the Volani and the freed beings to establish a new reality in the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, there was a species that actively sought out threats and eliminated them before they could spread: the Devourers, who had been the galaxy's greatest fear for millennia, were now being hunted down by human-led fleets that included volunteers from dozens of liberated species. The freed beings had learned from their human rescuers that running away was not the only option when faced with extinction. As the Horizon prepared to depart, Kristara, and respond to the next distress call, Elder Zephi transmitted a final message. Captain Morrison, when we sent our distress call, we hoped that someone might help us die with dignity. Instead, you taught us that death is not always inevitable. You showed us that sometimes the impossible is just another problem waiting to be solved. Morrison looked around at his crew, 43 humans, who had accidentally become the galaxy's protectors. Elder, we didn't come here to change the galaxy. We just came here to help our neighbors. And that, Elder Zephi replied, is exactly why the galaxy needed you. You are the first species we have encountered that possesses the ability to fight for others without expecting anything in return. You have weaponized hope itself. As the Horizon jumped to hyperspace toward their next rescue mission, Morrison realized that humanity had found its place in the galaxy. They were not explorers or conquerors or diplomats. They were the species that others called when the darkness seemed too strong to overcome. The galaxy had sent out a distress call, and the Deathworlders had answered. In doing so, they had taught the universe that sometimes refusing to surrender is the greatest gift one species can give to another.